Hello, I am your everyday average Jonathan. Join me this week while I turn this and this into these Gothic shackles or manacles. This should be a fairly quick build. I just need to find a subject which I can test them out on. So, girls! Hello, I am your everyday average Jonathan, and behind me is none other than Cheyenne Mountain, the home, the capital, the defense center of NORAD, North American Aerospace Defense Command. And one thinks of the epicenter of our nuclear capabilities, our defense capabilities in this regard. One thinks of something that is tightly bound down, something that is tightly controlled and protected. So much so that if you were to approach this in your vehicle and go through the gates, well, they would take you away in shackles. Thank you for bearing with me on that. What we are going to be building this week is going to be actually shackles. It's going to be manacles. It's going to be Gothic handcuffs. And before our minds wander to too many different avenues for that, it's just going to be an exploration into what makes something that is truly binding and potentially what is truly interesting in the process. So without further ado, it is beginning to rain. The storm is coming off Pikes Peak. My shop is a long way from here, so let's get on our way and get started.
I almost always do a little bit of research before I begin a project, especially if it's anything historical. So little did I know that by researching manacles, shackles, it was going to take me down a little bit of a rabbit hole, and I saw some things that I really didn't want to see and I certainly didn't need to know about. But essentially, shackles are probably as old as humanity itself. There are shackles that are made from metal, shackles that are made from leather, shackles that are made from rope and hemp, all sorts of things. But for me, I wanted to make something that was made from metal. I'm very intrigued with the different designs, the different mechanisms. For example, that one right there, that is the actual shackles that were put on John Wilkes Booth, the assassin for Abraham Lincoln. And there are many different locking mechanisms, different hinge mechanisms, all sorts of different designs. It just sort of boggles my mind that people have gone to great lengths to redesign and then design again and design anew. Things basically to hold hands and feet tight in bondage. For my design, I really only had two real criteria. Number one criteria was that I was going to make this out of 3/8 inch thick steel. I really wanted it to be extremely thick and robust looking. Number two was that I was going to make the chain and the manacles also spiked. I tend to need to make everything that I make spiked at some point, so this was no different, but I wanted it to have that sort of Gothic, almost medieval aesthetic to it. So this is very, very thick steel that I'm making here. And also I was going to make each of the hinge mechanisms on the two manacles. I was going to make it differently just because I wanted to practice different things. This one was going to be sort of a figure 8 kind of hinge. The manacles would go one particular directions, and then the hinge itself would sort of overlap and become a miniature figure 8 on the back of the manacles, as you'll see here. Also, I was going to make these, instead of perfectly round, I wanted to make them almost V-shaped, U-shaped, but with a little bit of a V, as you can see here. That way it sort of fits the actual dimensions of your wrist. Your wrist is not perfectly round, so why should a manacle be round? If I am to be honest, I have made a lot of hinges of different sizes from scratch, and this is probably the worst of all of the hinges that I've ever made. It was the most macro, the largest format of all of the hinges, but I had got it wrong all over the place. I had to do a lot of band-aid work. Here I'm making a really large rivet. This is not quite 3/8, it's actually a little bit bigger rivet that's going to become the pin for these, and I really like making rivets. I think it's great to make hinges and rivets and pins all from scratch. And then the attachment, the locking device, is what I'm creating at this point. I also wanted to make two different locking mechanisms, hinge mechanisms, attachment, clasp mechanisms, and this is the first one. I wanted to make something that's sort of form-fitting and almost has like the hinge of a gate or the clasp of a gate type look to it. And doing so, I was actually going to make two hinges. One is going to be smaller than the others and hold the actual flap, the actual hasp, and then the hasp itself was going to reach over the separation between the two parts of the manacles and cover that gap as you see here. Well, for the look of it, I give myself a B+ on that. For the function, as you're about to see here, I designed it really badly so that when it actually came on, it fit over well, but all of a sudden I noticed that once I put it back on, there was this really large gap, and that just won't do. I can't have something that sort of wiggles and moves. That lock that you see here is something that I inherited with the house that I bought. It's these, I have 3 of them, and they're actually US mail, old, I think mailbag locks. So I made everything so that it would fit that old lock. Now here is the second manacle that I'm making with a different hinge altogether. It's just going to be almost like a pipe hinge. Still using a rivet, a really large format rivet, but this is much simpler for me to make because the pipe was already made. Same process, making my own rivets. This is thicker than 3/8 inch. Again, I don't know what the exact diameter of that pin is, but it's very heavy. And now the attachment clasps at the end of it, I was going to make something different. I was going to make something that was more of a sort of pin and dowel. This is an old quick release, a steel quick release from an old bike wheel that I had laying around, and it actually worked out perfectly. I had to treat it a little bit, but it made a really great sort of key and keyhole type mechanism. Now I've got that worked out. The next thing I'm going to make on, and the last piece that I'm going to make on the actual cuffs themselves, will be the attachment for, I tend to be dropping things a lot these days it seems, but the actual attachment to the cuffs themselves. This is what the chain is going to attach to. And here they are, both slightly different format, about the same size. And now it comes time for me to make a whole lot of spikes. And when I say a whole lot of spikes, I actually mean 8 in all. These spikes were going to be going between the chains. So I was going to have probably about 16 to 17 inches worth of chain, and I wanted it to be spiked. So each one of these will go between the chains. And now it's on to actually making each individual link. I've made a few chains. I'm not good at any of it. It's kind of fun, but it's also kind of tedious at the same time. This is 5/16 round steel stock. I wouldn't need to get these very much perfectly true, perfectly circular, because I was just going to weld them together, then come back and sort of flatten them out, elongate them into a very long oval. And here's where my engineering brain completely failed me. I thought that I was going to need to give these a half twist, so each side had a quarter twist to it. And in doing so, I actually rotated the twists from different side to different side. And I thought in doing that I would have these spikes that sort of opposed each other. One would be at the 3 o'clock and the 9 o'clock, one would be at the 12 and the 6. And I'm totally wrong on that, completely wrong. I should have left them untwisted and they would have done exactly what I was hoping for without having to twist them. But they do have more personality with this twist. So 4 links per side, and in the center of each of these 4 links, I was going to have a large master link, if you will, a little bit thicker. It's almost 1/2 inch thick, as you see here. It's also from an old tractor tire chain, and if you were to be fastened to a ship's mast or something more permanent, that's the master link that I think that would happen with. So that's the idea behind that. Now I'm making one final thing, and that is I'm going to make 7 spikes that go directly on the manacles themselves. If you see here, this is before I hit it with the wire wheel. All of those little striations, that wire wheel just takes them off, makes them smoother, gives them a little bit more personality without it looking like it was sanded by something. All right, I actually felt pretty smart by the way I did this. Drilled a hole in the manacles, put that little spike, reversed it in there. Over the hole, I centered it directly onto that black mark, and then I welded it from the inside out. Pretty smart, right? Yeah, except for they all failed. And in the end, I ended up just welding them from the outside. And if that looks wonky to you, well, it's because it is. It's all twisted, all discombobulated. I used a trailer hitch lock for the one side that I couldn't get the actual US mail lock on. But here they are. I do enjoy the aesthetic and what it looks like. I do get something out of the overall product, but there's some hiccups, as we'll find out.
All right, thank you for joining me for this build. This was a very fun build. In some ways, it was kind of an awkward build for me. Okay, straight into the learnings. The first learning that I had was something that I didn't really expect, and that is the few people that I told that I was going to make shackles or manacles, I got almost 100% of the time a raised eyebrow or an odd look, as if they were questioning the reasoning, what I was going to do with them, which I sort of understand. I guess it's not often that you hear somebody say that they're going to make shackles, handcuffs, a ball and chain or something. That seems like it might be related to something else. I'll tell you what, if those crows behind me don't be quiet, you're going to see some manacles fly through the air. But I'm largely pleased. I like the way that these attachments, that these hinges and these attachments work. I think that's pretty cool. The other kind of interesting thing for these is that my wrists are probably average. My forearms would tend to be a little on the big side, but my wrists are fairly average in size. So really somebody with anything bigger than mine or much smaller than mine, of course these probably wouldn't work very well, but that's just fine because this is essentially just a study in what it's like, what it is to recreate, learning about this item through almost reverse engineering in a sense. Okay, what did not work out so well is, as you heard me earlier in the video, the fact that I made these chains the way that I did, the object that I was looking for was to have these spikes be perpendicular to one another when they hung. I did not achieve that because I didn't think it through, and I twisted each of these chains so that they basically are in the exact same orientation all the way down. Even though these are four, two of the four are twisted the other direction, they're twisted in opposite directions, it still doesn't matter. I should have just left them untwisted. It would have saved me a lot of heartache, and then they would have been perpendicular to one another. Also, in some ways, these spikes that I put on here, they're actually kind of a pain in the ass. And here's why. In putting these on, trying to put those locks in there, I was jabbing myself right and left. I drew blood here and there. Did they need to be on here for this to function and be interesting? Yeah, I think they're kind of cool, but they really did get in the way. Overall, I give these the grade of probably a B- or so. Look, I really enjoy it. Function, there's quite a bit left to be desired. All right, that's it for me for this week. I don't know exactly what I'll be making for the coming week, but I hope that you join me for that. If you like builds like this that are just interesting, whimsical, avant-garde, please check out my channel for more builds where I take on everything from weapons to armor to practical items to novelties and the like. Until next week, God bless. Thank you for joining me.